any shooting of a gun in Niger might not only affect the Sahel, but in the entire Africa might be affected, because you will see a ripples effect and a reaction from the people. And that is the reason why I feel that the Champions League final between NATO and Russia that they are planning to host in Africa should be avoided by the members of the ECOWAS.
Hello, my great and wonderful people. How una day today? I hope all of una day well. Today we get a lot of issues for our table when we say one quickly they discuss with you in form of video concerning the things when we say they happen right now for inside this country, Nigeria. The issue of Niger not be any strange thing to each and every one of us again. But as they break, now so they gather a lot of momentum, and a lot of people that they come outside to throw their weight and also speak out concerning the danger when they say that they see ahead of this little fire when they say what they see if they gather for Niger Republic. Now, yesterday we see how it be say Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, when it be the former emir of Kano, take his own bold step to visit this good plotter for Niger Republic. That will not be the real message of today, but we'll bring that one to you in a full comprehension for another broadcast. Now, this one when it be say if they our table now, the one when it be say Daniel Bwala, when it be the spokesperson of Atiku Abubakar of PDP for this 2023 presidential election. He don't come outside to review some certain secrets concerning the whole fire when it be say if they gather for Niger, most especially concerning these ECOWAS actions and all their threats concerning Niger government. Even as ECOWAS still they plan to meet today for their own general meeting to discuss further steps when it be said they will take against this whole matter. And this very one, this morning, Bwala come aside for Arise News interview to review some certain things when it be say it concern this whole matter. And before we go on to the review this video to you in full, one quickly advise you, I beg, take your time to listen to this video from the beginning to the end, because a lot they want to be say you need to know. And also, I beg, help us to like this video, because now the only way will be say YouTube will take help us recommend this video to other people. The more this video get likes, the more that they recommend them to people. Now their own policy now in be that very one. Thank you so much for your support.
Good morning, Mr. Bwala, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Daniel. It's good to see you. It's good to see you feeling very comfortable in the Arise News London studio. Anyway, I know that there's a lot that you would like to talk about. You've complained on social media about the likely militarization of diplomacy in the context of the crisis in Niger. The ECOWAS leaders are going to meet today to consider the way forward. What will be your recommendations to them? Since we are looking for solution, we all know what the issues are.
Right. So thank you for having me. There is a law of leadership that says if you are leading and no one is following, you are simply taking a walk. That appears to be the situation that ECOWAS is in at the moment. As we speak up till today, the American government has not designated what happened in Niger as a military coup. Because if it did, the U.S. government is expected by their law to cease all military assistance, technical support, and diplomatic relationship. The French government has not taken any measure comparable or commensurable to what ECOWAS is in discussion with. You see, the problem we have with ECOWAS, I think, is diplomacy. That is the problem that ECOWAS has. ECOWAS rolled out their threats before ever initiating the role of diplomacy. Now, there are facts that ECOWAS must live by, must come to terms with. Number one is that the Niger military junta will not bow to their threats and sanctions because it appears they have moved on. Even their president, the ousted president, was allegedly reported as having signed his resignation and has gone home. Number two, the military strike may cause a complex situation that may escalate to what we call the Africa Spring. Remember the Arab Spring. And if that happens, then even the leaders of ECOWAS states themselves might be removed from power. Number three is that diplomacy, not grandstanding, is the only option to return to democracy in Niger. And very importantly, even the process that will lead up to the return to civil rule may last up to a year and a half because it will require the conduct of election. And if you want to know how long it will take, all you need is just to ask our Nigeria's INEC. Africa must reset relationships with the West for mutual and shared benefits. The idea of a puppet relationship will not be accepted by the civil populace in Africa. The political leaders and public officers must be accountable to their people. They must conduct elections that will reflect the wishes of the people, while the respect of the right of minority is protected. Here is where the problem is. There is a loss of confidence by the civil populace in Africa, even on their leadership, which is why, for example, when you come to Nigeria and you look at the head of the ECOWAS, the president, he is leading and no one is following. He does not have, he appears not to have the constitutional backing to engage militarily in Nigeria or using the Nigerian armed forces. If you look at Section 5, it is quite clear. Even the proviso in Section 5 and Sub 5, where it says you can engage in a special operation, even then he does not meet that test that will qualify for him to engage, because there is no imminent threat against the territorial integrity of Nigeria, against Nigerian interests, or against the people of Nigeria. He also does not seem to enjoy the popular support of the people to engage. There is no part of Nigeria at the moment you talk to people and environment that you will get the support of the people to engage militarily. If you go to Lagos as we speak and you take a poll to ask, that is the constituency where the president comes from, whether they will support a military engagement, I'm telling you, you will find that majority of the people will not support. So the question to ask is, what brief is Mr. President holding? Whose brief is Mr. President holding? And that is why ECOWAS is in a logjam at the moment, having flip-flop in their policies, haven't failed. In fact, this is even where the danger is. Even these sanctions that they are placing on Niger without engaging diplomatically, at the end of the whole attempt is to make sure that the Nigerian people feel that the military junta is not a legitimate government, and then they will react against the government. There are theories that said that also may be counterproductive, because every single citizen of Niger at the moment appear to support the military junta because of the dissatisfaction about the West and the influence on their democratic leaders. So the bad side of it is that you might think the sanction is going to press them hard and make him unpopular, and they may convert that into renewed energy to engage against West African states. This is why ECOWAS has to be very careful.
Well, in response to your theory around sanctions, 11 political activists or political spokespeople in Niger have written a letter to the president saying that the sanctions are actually hard-hitting, and that the civilians in Niger are the ones who are suffering or the hard hit. So it does have an effect, and it does have an impact, and the people are responding, right? But beyond that, I'd like to ask you, with regards to your series of tweets on why we must avoid a war with Niger, where you say that this particular war would actually, or is actually, between NATO and Russia, and that Africa should not try to come, or ECOWAS should not try to come in between or come into the big boys' fight. Can you expound on that, please?
So this is my feeling. ECOWAS is being tempted into throwing their dogs in a fight. If you look at what is happening in Niger, it appears to be the Champions League final of what is happening at the moment in Ukraine between Russia and the NATO. Interest. Now, one of the national security interests of a country is the territorial integrity, but one of the foreign policy of every country is national interest, which is why if you look at most parts of Africa, you see military base disguised in form of assisting militarily, but in actual fact protecting natural resources in those areas. Even if you come to the Lake Chad Basin in Nigeria, you will look at that. Now, what happened in Niger is a bloodless coup. There is an uncoded principles, even in coup, that where a coup is bloodless, you don't resolve it by blood. So where lies the threat of NATO, of ECOWAS? ECOWAS appear to be, and this is one of the problems we have in Africa, where when a leader is blackmailed by the West, or when they have a dossier on that leader, then they are likely to blackmail that leader into carrying out their wishes. There is no imminent threat against any ECOWAS state. What happened in Niger? No imminent threat. Usually, before you can come militarily or before you can take measures or action that will be considered as severe, is where the action or where the conduct in that state poses imminent threat to the neighbors. Now, it was a bloodless coup. Nobody was killed. They have even gone ahead to form government. The United States of America, as we speak today, is engaging with them diplomatically, recognizing the existence and the operations of the leader of Niger. Now, NATO as a whole have member states. The interest in Niger is largely benefiting the NATO members. Recently, if you look at the dissatisfaction in Africa, most of the leaders in Africa, especially in places where there are military takeover, it is born out of this feeling that those civilian heads of state are puppet to the West. And so military are taking over. That is not supported, and I will not be the one here supporting that. But in actual fact, if you look at the engagement of members of these countries that are having military takeovers, you see that their relationship with Russia is deepening. You see that commitment that Russia is giving to them is deepening. In fact, even if you look at it from the larger point of, was it not African leaders that recently visited St. Petersburg, and they were given a forgiveness of about $200 billion? There is a cautious relationship, or there is a flirtatious relationship between Russia and the people in Africa. And I think that the leader of Russia is having a feeling that in order for him to properly fund the war in Russia, there is need for him to have and acquire resources in Africa, or to destabilize their focus in Africa, so that way they will be distracted from what is happening in Ukraine. So, and African leaders should be able to look at this from the point of view of Africa interest, because any shooting of a gun in Niger might not only affect the Sahel, but in the entire Africa might be affected, because you will see a ripples effect and a reaction from the people. And that is the reason why I feel that the Champions League final between NATO and Russia that they are planning to host in Africa should be avoided by the members of the ECOWAS.
In all of this, there's been a pushback in Niger. So some local rebel groups are beginning to say, we'll fight for Bazoum. What are the implications?
So this is the problem I have with the West. Because there is also a theory that the West is funding or they are engineering the rebel group, which of course, if you understand a little bit of intelligence, you will know that this is in the textbook. Oftentimes, because of certain diplomatic bottleneck, they will not engage militarily direct, even though they have their bases around these places. What they will do is that they will identify rebel groups, even the civil society that Ayo talked about, that wrote a letter to the president saying we are hurting, we are feeling, and all that. Come to Nigeria and go to Lake Chad and to Borno State and look at most of the NGOs that are operating there. Most of them are intelligence collectors for certain interests in the West. And so when you see them reacting like that, it is seen most of the times as NATO activating the mechanism of using agents that they have on ground to create that sense of dissatisfaction. Nobody in a country will be happy. For example, if you look at Nigeria, are we all happy with what is happening? There is terrible economic situation. Why are people not talking about military takeover? Because we have come a long way. We are not looking back. Military takeover can never be a solution to the problem. So those who are supporting the idea of a counter coup by the use of these rebel forces in Niger, I hold the view that they do not hold the interest of Africa, because the minute the rebel group engage, then that means you are going to find a situation where there will be what we call arms group and warring factions. And before you know, it becomes a situation that cannot be controlled. So theories have counter theories. And it is my humble view that ECOWAS ought to play a part by engaging with the rebels group and all these people and tell them not to be involved. Because the whole idea is that once there is an armed conflict in Niger, look at the border states in Nigeria. Most of our people who live in the northwestern region have their relations in Niger. Once this conflict starts, there will be a humanitarian situation in that part of Nigeria. And when you look at some of our bandits and terrorists that have been coming through Mali, through our bushes and attacking, the minute you create a chaotic situation there, that either of this armed group is going to find them as worthy tools to use to destabilize the part of the West Africa. And that is the reason why we still hold the view that Africa must be delivered from the sense that the West holds its interests more than the interests of the African people. What they need to engage with the leader of Niger at the moment is to engage and say, what are your plans for a return to democratic rule? Do you have an agenda? How long is it going to take? Can you start creating political party? Because the man has moved on. He does not look like one that will budge, and using the military force will be counterproductive.
Well, Daniel Bwala, let me ask you, what's your assessment of the role of the international community so far, beyond ECOWAS? The EU, the United Nations, and also the fact that those countries that have military bases in Niger just seem to be waiting on ECOWAS to take the initiative. Some of them have imposed sanctions. They've withheld international aid. Do you think that, this is truly a proxy war that, the West is trying to initiate?
Yes, I believe it's a proxy war that the West is initiating. And I've also believed that noticing that the president or the military junta in Niger is not planning to budge, so they are activating other means by either instigating, influencing, or threatening the people they have control over to ensure that the man is removed. The bigger question to ask is, I thought that the whole idea of a government is leadership by the popular view. If you look at the people in Niger after the military takeover, it appears majority of them are in support of the military takeover, not because they wanted a military intervention, but because they felt dissatisfied by their government. Africa must focus on the major problem confronting Africa at the moment. There is a growing dissatisfaction in Africa that African leaders are not delivering on the promises of democracy. This was how the Arab Spring started, and that's why we keep saying that ECOWAS and African Union must come together. Okay, I give you an example, Dr. Abati. Recently, our girls had a knockout stage with England, the women. They held them up to penalty, and that's the women. If you look at the youth, the men, in various aspects of life, in entertainment, in science and technology, in education, they compete favorably with global powers. But only when it comes to political leadership, our own leaders appear to be beggars. Every now and then, they travel for quote-unquote summit, cap in hand, begging for support. Sometimes, even the support they crave for can be found in just one or two politicians that have misappropriated the funds in their country. You will see Africa-Russia summit, Africa-US summit, Africa-France summit, and very shortly, you will see Africa-UAE summit, and you might also see Africa and Barbados summit. What is wrong with African leaders? So a lot of people in Africa believe that even the position that ECOWAS heads of state are taking, it is self-preservation position. They are all trying to preserve themselves in power. They are not looking at the intrinsic problem, the main problem, the root cause of the problem, which is economic prosperity is not being delivered to the people in Africa. The security of lives and property is not guaranteed in Africa. 60% of the ECOWAS members are battling terrorism in their countries. They cannot even find a defined way to move. And suddenly you want to intervene in another part of the world. As per United Nations, usually they play the role of sit down look at the moment until member states of the Union begin to pull strings that is to their benefit. It is quite obvious that there is a vast interest of the West, which is NATO, in Niger over and above Russia. And it appears that China and Russia are beginning to discover a new ground in Africa, which is the reason why we find that. Now, for God's sake, why won't ECOWAS be discussing the broader picture of the problem? Economic prosperity, delivering security, define relationship with the West, so that when we talk with the West, it is a shared interest rather than we come cap in hand begging. Why is this discussion not going on? Why is it not in their agenda? All that is in their agenda is how to place sanction. When I read the government of Nigeria saying central banks place sanction on Nigerians' interests, those who supported coup, I asked, have you seen any business interest in Nigeria that is run by a Nigerian? Have you seen any business? Which identified politician or businessman from Niger has the government of Nigeria identified as a sponsor or supporter of the military junta? It's just copy and paste, because America also announced it against Russia.
Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe the Nigerian government is targeting Nigerians who may possibly be sympathetic towards the coup in Niger. Maybe people like you who are saying don't intervene militarily. So if you have bank accounts, you better keep an eye on your financial details.
I wish I have investment in Niger. Now, if Nigerian government or central bank is targeting, possibly because it is alleged, possibly Nigerians who are sympathetic of Nigerian, then I sadly I will say that the president of Nigeria will be considered as engaging in an economic war against the northern Nigeria. Now, let me explain. Most of Nigerians who share border with Niger, who have relations and family members in Niger, it is natural that some of them will have properties in Niger. Maybe some of them may have business interests in Niger. And since the central bank is not an intelligence agency like NIA that can identify and trace the funds of the businessmen as one that is supporting the Niger military junta, then that means the government is going to use a blindfold to classify every Nigerian who has a business or a property in Niger as someone who is supporting the Nigerians, and which is terrible, because at the end of the day, it will not be an intelligence-driven exercise, it will be politically motivated exercise. This is why people believe that this policy flip-flop is because Mr. President has not actually settled down to constitute an intelligence agency. He needs to have a workable, robust, intelligence-driven NIA. He needs to have a leader there. Because you see, what is happening between us and Niger and the rest of our members is actually at the moment the job of NIA and not the military. Because Nigeria is in no way engaged militarily or suffering a territorial threat with the people of Niger or any of our neighbors. Why has the NIA not given to the president information as to the fact that there was a planned military takeover? In Russia, the chief of intelligence was sacked by Putin because he failed to deliver this intelligence to Russia that Ukraine was about, taking certain steps like that. What is the role of Nigeria's intelligence agency in the whole of this conversation? We have not seen from the president or from a National Assembly or anybody any information from the Nigerian Intelligence Agency as to the operations of the Nigerians or certain threats around this border. So my view is that this is why a lot of people, I've seen one article even yesterday when somebody said the president's decision lately, it is like a clandestine war against northern Nigeria. This is what the president must avoid. What the president at the moment is actually confronted with is Nigeria. If only the president realized the enormous tax, the president will not have even accepted the role of ECOWAS chairs in the first place, because that role, understandably, was actually suggested to two presidents, and all of them declined because their countries didn't have the needed funds to finance ECOWAS. So this is the threat that subsidy removal savings is likely going to use to manage ECOWAS at the moment. Only God knows how much has been expended since this engagement and the meeting with ECOWAS heads of state. I think that either the West use this incident to distract the president from focusing on his primary responsibility, which is the security of lives and the welfare of the Nigerian people. In the last 2 weeks, we have not even talked about the fact that workers' salary, workers can't eat, prices of items are going up. We are focusing on Niger, which has no threat absolutely with the territorial border on the lives and security of the Nigerian people. The president needs to have a new DGNIA. He needs to constitute intelligent platforms in Nigeria and have intelligence collection that is reasonable for the purpose of this. CIA would have been, if it were in America, this is what CIA would have done. In fact, they can even perform special operation which does not require Senate approval and be able to curtail this problem. But have we had anything like that from the CIA and from the NIA?
Well,
All right, my great and wonderful people, thank you so much for your time. We just need to leave this interview to this very extent so that you will feel understand everything when we say this man review such intelligent information to each and every one of us. All right, I'll leave you to share your own opinion with us in the comment section if you want us to draw the line of this broadcast here. As we promise, say the total comprehension of the visit when it be say the emir or the former emir of Kano, when we say in him na Lamido Sanusi, Lamido, pay to this coup plotter for Niger Republic yesterday. Now only the visit when we say it don't get headway for this whole matter. Now it be that. We'll bring out to you shortly. All right. We'll see you again when we see you. Remember, we love you all. Bye-bye.